The sky over Willow Ridge looked like something out of a watercolor painting, soft strokes of peach, lavender, and gold melting into each other as the sun dipped low behind the hills. Emma Carson stood at the window of the town's quaint little bookstore, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the edge of a hand-painted, closed at 6 inches sign. The final golden rays spilled across the wooden floor inside, catching dust motes that danced like tiny fireflies. She loved this hour, the hush that settled over the world, the promise of quiet before night fully arrived. Books had always been her sanctuary. As a children's book illustrator, Emma had built her life around stories that comforted and healed stories. She wished someone had told her when she was a scared little girl with paint-stained fingers and too many goodbyes behind her. She worked part-time at the bookstore for peace more than pay, and it gave her exactly what she needed: familiarity, gentle days, and very little room for surprises. Until today, the bell over the door jingled unexpectedly just minutes before closing. Emma turned, already preparing her usual kind smile and a polite, "We're about to close," but the words caught somewhere between her chest and her throat. He stepped inside, tall and sun-kissed, with the kind of worn leather jacket that suggested stories and secrets. His dark blonde hair was wind-tousled, his expression curious and open. He had the kind of presence that made the air shift slightly, like someone had opened a window in a room long closed. "Sorry, am I too late?" he asked, glancing at the sign. Emma blinked. "Almost," she said, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "But if you're quick, I can give you a few minutes." He smiled, and something about that smile relaxed. A little uneven made her heart do something it hadn't done in a while. Stir. "Just enough time to find something worth reading," he said, stepping further in, his eyes scanning the shelves. He moved with the ease of someone who'd seen the world but wasn't jaded by it. Emma watched him out of the corner of her eye as he moved between shelves, his fingers running over spines, pausing here and there as if reconnecting with old friends. "I'm Liam, by the way," he said suddenly, turning to face her. "Liam Whitaker." She hesitated for a breath, then nodded. "Emma." "Emma," he repeated, like he was trying the name on for size. "Nice to meet you, Emma." She gave a small smile, pretending to straighten a pile of books near the register. "So, what kind of story are you looking for?" He thought about it for a moment, then said, "Something real. Something that doesn't pretend love is easy or perfect, but still believes it's worth it." Emma's hands paused over the books. She didn't realize she'd been holding her breath until she exhaled slowly. That narrows it down a little. They shared a smile, quiet and curious. A moment that felt ordinary and extraordinary at the same time. Minutes passed as she guided him through sections, offering suggestions, sharing thoughts. Conversation flowed like they were continuing something rather than beginning it. When he finally chose a novel, an old, slightly tattered copy of The Light Between Oceans, Emma rang it up and handed it to him with a receipt tucked inside. "Thanks for letting me crash closing time," he said, cradling the book like something valuable. Emma tilted her head. "Thanks for asking for a real story." As he stepped out the door, the bell jingled again, fading into the hum of the evening. What neither of them knew was that this fleeting encounter, born in a sliver of golden hour, would soon unravel the quiet lives they thought they were meant to live. And somewhere, quietly inside Emma's heart, something had begun again. Something that felt like breathing after holding your breath too long. Sophia's mornings began in quiet solitude, just the soft hum of her espresso machine and the early rays of sunlight spilling through the bay window of her bookshop cafe, the Story Nook, nestled on a quaint cobblestone street in Charleston. The cafe was her sanctuary, filled with worn wooden shelves stacked with novels and corners designed for readers to lose themselves in stories. Every inch reflected her personality, warm, timeless, and a little bit romantic. She'd built it herself after leaving her job in publishing, tired of deadlines and city noise. Here, she didn't just sell coffee and books. She offered people the chance to breathe, dream, and slow down. Sophia had a routine, a rhythm that kept her grounded. She opened the cafe at 7, arranged fresh-cut flowers on each table, and played soft jazz from a vintage radio. Her regulars adored her. They called her the heart of the street, a woman with a smile that felt like home. But despite the beauty she created around her, there was a quiet ache in her chest that sometimes settled between pages and lingered in the silence after closing hours. She was content, yes, but a part of her still longed for something more. Not just love, but a connection that felt safe and deep and real. Noah, on the other hand, was a man between worlds. After years as a travel journalist, hopping from country to country and sleeping under more stars than roofs, he'd returned to Charleston to help care for his ailing father. His soul was restless, full of stories and moments from distant lands, yet lately he found himself yearning for roots. The house he grew up in stood as both a comfort and a weight. His father, once strong and vibrant, now moved slowly, speaking more in memories than words. Noah spent his days splitting time between caregiving and trying to write a memoir his publisher had been waiting on for 2 years. He wandered the city on long walks, hoping inspiration would strike. One morning, the scent of freshly baked cinnamon rolls drifted through the air, guiding him toward the story nook. Drawn in by the quiet buzz and the charm of the little bookstore cafe, he stepped inside and paused. The place looked like it belonged in a movie. Warm-toned fairy lights glowed above, and mismatched chairs hugged each table. And then there was Sophia behind the counter, her hair tied up messily, wiping a teacup with the kind of care most people reserved for handling heirlooms. They had already met, briefly, in the previous scene, but now, as Noah stood quietly watching her from the doorway, something shifted. This wasn't just a charming cafe. It felt grounding, safe, as if he'd stumbled into a memory he hadn't made yet. And as for Sophia, when she looked up and saw him, again tousled hair, travel-worn backpack, eyes that carried the weight of oceans, her heart hesitated for half a beat. There was a familiarity about him, like a character from one of the books lining her shelves. Over the next few weeks, Noah became a quiet fixture in the story nook. He always sat in the same corner, nursing a black coffee and scribbling into a leather notebook. Sometimes he stayed for hours, lost in thought. Sometimes he simply watched, observing the way Sophia laughed with customers or turned pages behind the counter. Their conversations were brief, polite, surface level, but something unspoken hung between them, a thread slowly tightening. Outside the cafe, their lives remained full of unspoken burdens. Sophia often visited her sister's grave on Sundays, bringing daisies and updates she wished she could give in person. Losing Lily at just 22 had changed her, softened her edges, but also made her cautious. She believed in love, yes, but she feared the fragility of it, the way it could vanish in a moment. Noah carried his own ghosts. Years of chasing stories had left him with beautiful memories but little emotional stability. He was known for never staying anywhere too long. And now, as he watched his father slip into the folds of old age, he questioned the cost of all he'd chased. Yet, as time passed, Sophia and Noah began to discover slivers of each other in stolen moments. Like the time Sophia gave him a notebook for thoughts you're not ready to write yet, or when Noah fixed the cafe's back door without being asked. There was tenderness in their glances, kindness in their silences. They weren't ready to name it, but something between them had begun to take root. Sophia found herself looking forward to his visits, the way he always seemed to notice the smallest things: the chipped paint on the window frame, the way she hummed when she was focused. And Noah, though still carrying the weight of his father's illness and his own fears of settling down, felt a strange peace when he was near her. She reminded him of everything he didn't know he was missing. Their connection wasn't loud or sudden. It was slow, blooming in the quiet spaces, like the way morning light filters gently through fog. And in that steady unfolding, something inside both of them began to thaw. For the first time in a long time, they were not simply surviving their own histories. They were, perhaps unknowingly, writing the beginnings of a new chapter dashed together. It started with little things. Noah began coming earlier and staying later at the story nook. He switched from black coffee to the lavender honey latte Sophia once shyly recommended just to see her smile when he ordered it. And Sophia, who used to close the cafe promptly at 6, started staying open just a bit longer, pretending to wipe already clean counters when he lingered. They still kept their boundaries, still danced around the feelings neither dared name. But there was a growing warmth between them, a comfort that made the air feel softer when they were together. Some days they'd talk about the books he read as a child, or the towns she dreamed of visiting. Other times they'd sit in silence, content in the Nurness one rainy afternoon, with clouds hugging the sky and thunder rumbling low. The cafe emptied earlier than usual. Noah didn't leave. Instead, he moved to the stool by the counter as Sophia lit a few candles for ambience. "Storms like this always remind me of monsoon season in Mumbai," he said, resting his elbows on the wood. Sophia looked up, curious. "You've been to India?" "Twice. Once for a travel piece on chaiwalas, and another just to walk the old streets of Jaipur. I'd go back in a heartbeat." He glanced at her. "Have you ever been?" Sophia shook her head. "Nowhere outside the US. Closest I've been to adventure is probably Savannah, and even that was with a GPS. Noah laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "We should change that, you and me. A spontaneous road trip. No map, no reservations, just the road and music and too much coffee." She laughed too, then faltered when their eyes met. The silence was full-charged, and something passed between them. An almost kiss suspended in time. But just then, a gust of wind rattled the windows, and Sophia looked away. "You hate traveling with me," she said softly. "I overpack and talk too much during long drives." Noah smiled, not moving his eyes from her. "I think I'd love that." Sophia's cheeks flushed, and she busied herself with the espresso machine, but the tension between them didn't fade. It grew thicker, more palpable with every passing day. That weekend, Sophia invited Noah to a local book fair she was helping organize. He said yes immediately, even though book fairs weren't his thing. She watched him charm old women at the poetry booth and laugh with kids in the storytelling tent. He watched her move like she belonged, kind, graceful, alive. At one point, they found themselves walking along the pier nearby, the golden hour casting everything in a soft, honeyed glow. Sophia had taken off her shoes, walking barefoot on the worn planks, the wind playing with her hair. "You really love it here," Noah said, hands in his pockets. Sophia nodded. "It's peaceful. Charleston holds pieces of who I used to be, and who I'm trying to become." Noah looked at her, his voice low. "And who are you becoming?" She turned to him slowly, their steps slowing. "Someone brave, I think." Noah's heart stilled. "You already are." The words hung there. Intimate, vulnerable. She looked at him like she wasn't used to being seen. And he looked at her like he couldn't believe he hadn't noticed her sooner. That night, after he walked her home and stood on her porch beneath a canopy of stars, neither of them moved for a long moment. The world felt still. Right. Noah reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, and she leaned into his touch, just slightly, just enough. He whispered, "Good night, Sophia." And she whispered back, "Good night, Noah." But the door closed before lips could meet, because even though everything inside her screamed let him in, the scars on her heart still whispered not yet. A week later, Sophia hosted a small poetry night at the cafe. Noah sat in the front row, watching her with quiet admiration as she introduced readers and recited lines of her own. When she read, "Some loves don't arrive loud and sudden. They walk in quietly, filling spaces you didn't." No were empty. His heart ached, because it felt like her words were about him, about them. After the event, the cafe emptied slowly. Noah stayed behind, helping her stack chairs. "You're a beautiful writer," he said. Sophia looked at him, unsure whether to deflect or accept the compliment. "Thank you. It's easier to write what I feel than say it out loud. Then write me something," he said gently. "Anything, even if it's just one sentence." She stared at him. "And what will you do with it?" "I'll read it," he said simply, again and again. Sophia blinked away the sudden well of emotion. "You make it hard not to feel things." Noah stepped closer. "That's the thing, Sophia. I don't want you to not feel things. I just want you to know it's safe to feel them with me." There. Closeness now was undeniable, fingers brushing, breath mingling, but still no kiss, not yet. As if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for the right moment. But attraction isn't always romantic sunsets and soft jazz. Sometimes it's the way he notices when you're too tired to pretend. The way she brings him chamomile tea without asking. It's quiet, patient. It grows in the spaces between fear and courage. One evening, after Sophia had a rough day-old grief resurfacing with her sister's birthday approaching, Noah found her in the back room, alone, wiping away tears. He didn't ask questions, didn't press. He just sat beside her, shoulder to shoulder, and whispered, "I'm here." That night, she didn't close the cafe at 6. They stayed until midnight, talking about everything and nothing. She told him about Lily, her laughter, her light. He told her about his mother, who left when he was 12, and how silence became his shield. It wasn't passion that bound them that night. It was truth, raw and unscripted, and maybe that's when Sophia's walls began to fall, not because Noah forced them down, but because he waited, because he saw her, and maybe that's when Noah realized he wasn't running anymore. He was already home. Noah had never noticed how time slowed when he was with her, how hours collapsed into minutes, in the comfort of her company. And Sophia had never felt more understood than in the quiet moments when he simply looked at her, as if he could see every layer of her soul. They didn't need grand gestures or candlelit nights to define what was slowly unfolding between them. It was the quiet walks, the shared smiles, the way their silences spoke just as much as their words. Their routines began to interlace, unintentionally at first. Sophia started bringing an extra coffee with her whenever she passed by Noah's bookstore, and he always pretended to act surprised, though the way he smiled gave him away. He would pull out a chair by the window for her, where the morning sun poured in like warm honey. She'd sip her coffee and read one of the poetry books he'd tucked aside just for her. Their late-night texts turned into nightly phone calls. And then sometimes, no words at all, just breathing, just presence. Just being one night, after a particular long conversation about their childhood dreams, Sophia admitting she used to choreograph dances in her bedroom, Noah revealing he once wanted to be a songwriter, there was a pause. Neither wanted to hang up. "I'm glad I met you, Noah," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm glad you stayed," he replied gently. "You didn't run, Miss Would've." That night, Sophia didn't sleep easily. Not from anxiety, but from the fluttering awareness that her heart had begun to crave him. Sophia found out Noah's birthday from Margot, the cafe owner who had always adored him like a nephew. When the day came, she didn't ask what he wanted or what his plans were. She simply showed up at his door with a homemade lemon loaf and a tiny plant in a ceramic pot that said, "Keep growing." He blinked in surprise, still holding a book in one hand. "You remembered?" "I do have a good memory," she grinned, stepping inside as he held the door open. "And Margot may or may not have spilled your birth date." He laughed, setting the book aside. "You really made this?" She nodded. "I figured you wouldn't throw yourself a party, so I thought I'd bring a bit of celebration to you." It was the first time someone had done that in years. After his parents passed, birthdays had become just another day. But that evening, with warm tea, quiet music, and Sophia humming softly as she lit a candle, it felt like home. He watched her across the small kitchen table, the flicker of the candlelight dancing in her eyes. "You always do that," he said quietly. "Do what?" "Make things feel okay." Sophia's dance studio renovation started to move forward, and she'd often share paint swatches or mirror placement ideas with Noah, who surprisingly had a knack for aesthetics. One afternoon, he brought her a frame he found in an old thrift store. It was rustic and worn, but something about it felt right. Inside, he'd written a quote, "What if the place you're meant to be is waiting for you to believe in it again?" She stared at it, speechless. "I thought maybe this could go in your new studio," he added softly. Sophia blinked back tears. "That's beautiful." He rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. I just thought it might remind you that this place, this new beginning, it's yours." She didn't say much. She didn't need to. Instead, she stepped closer, took his hand, and held it quietly. That night, she danced barefoot in the center of the studio, and Noah sat on the floor watching her like she was painting the air. Her movements were fluid, raw, full of grace and grief all at once. It wasn't performance, it was healing. When she finally stopped, breathless and glowing, she walked to him and sat beside him. "I don't know who I'd be if I hadn't met you," she murmured. "You'd still be incredible," he said gently, "but I'm glad I get to see it firsthand." It rained one evening, unexpectedly hard. Sophia had just locked up the studio when she found herself drenched and running across the street to Noah's store. He was closing too. He opened the door with a laugh. "You look like a watercolor painting." "I'm freezing," she gasped, shaking her arms. He handed her a towel and brewed tea in the back. "Stay until the rain passes." They sat on the floor, sipping tea while one of Noah's vintage records played softly in the background. Ella Fitzgerald's voice filled the room. Noah reached over to tuck a wet strand of hair behind her ear, and for the first time, she didn't flinch at someone touching her like that. His hand lingered, brushing her cheek. She didn't pull away. "Keep wanting to kiss you," he admitted, his voice barely audible. Sophia's heart fluttered, not from nerves, but from a deep-seated ache that had waited years to be seen this way. "I'm not ready," she said truthfully. "I know," he replied, "and I'm not in a hurry." It wasn't the moment of passion, but of promise. And in that promise, she felt safe. They drove out of town one weekend to a small hilltop Noah used to go to as a teenager. The sky was endless, and stars dotted it like memories waiting to be rediscovered. Laying side by side on a blanket, they shared more than stories. They shared silences filled with meaning. Sophia whispered, "I don't let people get close. I've always been afraid they'll leave." Noah turned to her, eyes full of warmth. "I'm not planning on going anywhere. But what if I fall and it breaks me again? Then I'll be there to help you up, every single time." She exhaled deeply, like letting go of a weight she'd carried too long. And for the first time in years, she believed someone. They didn't call it love yet, but it pulsed beneath everything, beneath their laughter, their silences, the way her head fit on his shoulder perfectly. They were building something slow, sacred and unshakable. Love didn't crash into them like a storm. It settled, like breath after crying and loving him, Sophia realized, was starting to feel like breathing again. The warmth that had bloomed between them began to tremble under the weight of reality. It started with small things, a missed call, an unread message, but it wasn't the silence that hurt. It was the shift in tone, the way Ayan's once steady presence began to waver. Leena noticed it first during a volunteer meeting. Ayan smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He seemed distracted, distant. She told herself not to overthink, not to fall into old patterns of assuming blame, but the annoying feeling didn't leave. Then came the evening that cracked the calm. A woman arrived at the center, sharply dressed and out of place. She asked for Ayan by name. Leena watched from across the room as they spoke, brief but tense. The woman left quickly, but not before throwing a pointed glance in Leena's direction. When Ayan returned to the office, Leena asked, trying to keep her voice steady, "Is everything okay?" He hesitated, then forced a smile. "Just someone from my past. Nothing important." But it was important. She could see it. And more than the woman's sudden appearance, it was Ayan's unwillingness to share that hurt. Days passed, and though he was still kind, something had changed. He was no longer fully present. He canceled the lake trip they planned, saying work was piling up. When he finally showed up again, late one evening, he looked exhausted. Leena met him at the door, her hands trembling. "What are we doing, Ayan? Are we still?" "Whatever this is." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "Leena, I didn't expect this to get so serious. I have things I need to figure out. I thought we were just taking it slow." Her heart sank. The words weren't cruel, but they were cutting. She had given him quiet understanding, gentle care, parts of her she hadn't let anyone see in years, and now he was stepping back like none of it mattered. She didn't yell or cry. She just nodded. "I need space too," she said quietly. That night, as she lay in bed, Leena wondered if she'd misread all the signs. Was she once again too much for someone? Or had she dared to believe that someone could stay? The echoes of her past fears returned louder this time. And Ayan, her calm, her comfort, was nowhere to be found. Days passed in a quiet ache. The community center felt emptier, even when it was full. Leena buried herself in work, avoiding the corner office and the memories it carried. She smiled through meetings, laughed with children, and cried only when the lights were off and no one could hear. She didn't expect Ayan to reach out. And for a while, he did in single quotes tea, until one late afternoon, as golden light spilled through the center's windows, he appeared. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, worn and silent. She looked up from her desk, her breath catching. For a second, it felt like nothing had changed, but it had. She braced herself, her voice calm but distant. "What are you doing here, Ayan?" He stepped forward, slow, deliberate. "I owe you the truth, all of it." He told her about the woman, his ex-fiancée, how their engagement ended years ago, but her sudden return had shaken things he thought he'd buried. She had shown up demanding closure, not because she wanted him back, but because she couldn't let him go. It had stirred guilt in him, old wounds, fears of failing someone again. "I thought pushing you away would protect you from that mess," he said. "But all I did was repeat the very thing you feared most, that someone would leave." Leena's eyes welled up, but she didn't look away. "Why didn't you trust me enough to tell me?" He looked pained. "Because I didn't trust myself. Not to mess it up, not to lose you." She didn't reply immediately. She was tired of being someone people tried to protect by keeping at a distance. "I didn't need protection, Ayan. I needed honesty." The silence between them was heavy but no longer hostile. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. It was the drawing she'd made on the community wall months ago, a tiny heart sketched beside her name. "I kept this," he said softly, "because every time I felt like giving up, it reminded me what peace looked like." Her breath hitched. Something inside her cracked, not from pain, but from relief. He wasn't perfect, neither was she. But in that moment, standing before her with nothing but truth in his eyes, she saw him not as the man who left, but the one brave enough to come back. A week later, the annual fall celebration at the community center brought everyone together under strings of warm lights and laughter. Children chased each other with painted faces. Music flowed from a small local band, and the scent of fresh pastries drifted through the cool evening air. Leena moved through the crowd with a peaceful ease she hadn't felt in months. Something inside her had settled, not because everything was perfect, but because it was real. Ayan was there too, helping organize the volunteers and handing out cider. Their conversations had become natural, again tentative at first, but slowly deeper, like stepping into familiar water after a long winter. There was no grand declaration, no dramatic scene. Just quiet moments, a glance held a little longer, a smile that reached the eyes, hands that brushed and lingered. Healing wasn't loud, it was patient. Later that evening, as the last lanterns glowed dimly and the crowd began to thin, Ayan found Leena on the center's rooftop, wrapped in her shawl, watching the stars. He joined her in silence, standing beside her for a long moment before speaking. "I don't want to waste any more time being afraid." She looked up at him. "Of what?" "Of deserving this. Of deserving you." She smiled, tears threatening again, but softer this time. "You don't have to deserve me, Ayan. Just love me without fear, without walls." And he did. Right there, on that rooftop, beneath the soft sky and the echo of laughter below, he reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Their fingers interlocked, steady and sure. It wasn't a perfect love, but it was honest, earned, and rooted in something deeper than desire-trust. As the first chill of winter whispered through the air, they stood together, no longer running from the past, no longer afraid of the future. Just two people who had found their way back through silence, through fear, through brokenness. And in that moment, Leena finally understood what it meant when people said love could feel like breathing again, because with him, it did.